Misha here. If you enjoy our episodes on career pathways in healthcare or the STEM field at large, then I have the perfect podcast recommendation for you, Raising Health. Previously called Bio Eats World, Raising Health comes from leading venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz, the same team behind the acclaimed A16Z podcast. Each episode, Raising Health dives deep into the heart of healthcare, biotech, and AI with venture capital investors and A16Z general partners. Along the way, they explore the real challenges and opportunities in health and biotech entrepreneurship. So whether you're interested in building a new digital healthcare company or your company is advancing a new, novel medicine, Raising Health sheds light on some of the opportunities and obstacles along the founder's journey. Not to mention, you'll hear raw insights, actionable advice from notable guests like Omada CEO and co-founder Sean Duffy, and AI expert and In Citro CEO Daphne Kohler. Don't miss out. Follow Raising Health on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and tell them I sent you.
A science story, huh?
These NYU scientists,
I felt
right.
I was so
And I just thought,
happy.
well,
I had figured it out.
It was that golden moment.
Because science was on my side.
Hey everyone, I'm Ben Lilly, and welcome to the Story Collider, where we bring you true personal stories about science. Quick note, we have events coming up in Portland, Oregon, Portland, Maine, Cambridge, Massachusetts, not Cambridge, United Kingdom yet, and New York City. Go to storycollider.org for more info. This week's story is from Carter Edwards. Carter was the very first person we asked to be on this show way back in the day. He returned for our 5-year anniversary show, May 2015, at Littlefield in Brooklyn.
So when I was 5 and a half, and I'm going to say 5 and a half very specifically because when you are 5 and a half, you count the months like they are these like electric turds that you just cannot wait to get rid of. Like every single month is the most important thing just to throw away from yourself as hard as you possibly can. So I was 5 and a half, and it was Christmas. And my older sister and I were spending Christmas for the first time with my newly divorced father, because my father and mother had separated when I was 3 3/4. And we were spending it for the first time in his apartment in Haverhill, Massachusetts. If you've never been to Haverhill, Massachusetts, it's exactly like every other town in northern Massachusetts. If you've never been to any town in northern Massachusetts, don't bother. It is basically just apple orchards and pig farms and a gnawing, longing sense of depression and bitterness over the failed textile industry that ended in the early 1900s. So we're there, and my father is trying really, really, really hard this Christmas, not just because it's our first Christmas, also because he failed miserably when it came to my birthday earlier that year, not this year, that year, because I'm not 5 and a half. Because for my birthday, there was only one thing that I wanted. There was one thing, and it was like one absolute thing that I wanted, and I was so very clear about it. I wanted a carrot playing the piano for my birthday cake. That is what I wanted. I don't know why. Right now, I could not tell you for the love of God why that's what I wanted, but I was fucking clear about what I wanted. And when my father brought out the birthday cake and it was a carrot cake, let me say that things didn't go exactly well after that, because no 5-year-old wants a birthday cake that involves vegetables. That's just not how they work. And so my father was trying tremendously hard this Christmas. He was trying so very, very hard. He so desperately wanted to do well. So we arrived on December 21st, a few days before Christmas, and there we are. We march into his new 3-room apartment in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Don't ever go there. And the tree is amazing. It's that tree. Like he's outdone himself with the tree, so that like the top of the tree is sort of like touching the ceiling and bending over a bit. Like he had a little bit too much hubris when it came to the tree, but it's totally fine. And underneath the tree, it's just full of presents. And I'm like, fuck yeah, Dad, nice work. This is amazing. So I walk over to the tree because I'm 5, and I'm like, course, I'm going to go inspect all these presents because that's what you do. It's your job as a 5-year-old is to inspect all the presents. So when I look at the first present, it says, oh, to Carter from Dad. To Amy, my older sister, from Dad. To Gail, my future stepmother, from Dad. I'm like, oh, this is great. He's done a good job. I dig a little bit deeper. And there I see, to Amy from Santa. To Carter from Santa. To Gail from Santa. To Dad from Santa, which is a little weird. And so I march over to my father, like the 3 feet to where his kitchen, the kitchen area of his apartment is, and I say, Dad, why are there presents underneath the tree on December 21st from Santa Claus? And he turns this color, which I was never able to describe until I became a drinker, and I can now call it Aperol pink. He turns Aperol pink and just looks down at the floor and just says, well, I mean, you know, Santa had to come by early because he wanted to make sure that he didn't miss giving you. And my sister's just over in the corner with her head in her hands, and she just goes, oh, Dad. And all at once I understood everything. And it wasn't sadness that washed out of me when I realized that Santa Claus didn't exist. Spoilers, guys, sorry. It wasn't sadness that washed out of me. It wasn't that at all. It was just this sense that I had just a moment ago existed in a world where Santa Claus existed. And now, just at the blink of an eye, I existed in a world where, and because my father is terrible at cross-examination and put under any kind of pressure, he very summarily dispatched the Easter Bunny and the Boogeyman and the Tooth Fairy very, very quickly. So all of a sudden I went from a world where all of these beautiful magical creatures existed to one where they didn't at all. And it was just this seismic movement underneath my feet as I grappled with this new reality of how the world worked. Now we're going to have a drink of beer. It happened again a few years later when I first went into junior high school. And I was sitting there in junior high school at our first day of history class, and my 5th grade history teacher, her name was Mrs. Clarkson, I think, or some other name that sounds exactly like a 5th grade history teacher, you know. Mrs. Clarkson was like, who can tell me one thing about George Washington? And I kind of knew that this was a trick. I kind of didn't think that I should say anything, and so I didn't. But one poor little scapegoat down at the front of the room raised his hand and says, I know that when he was very young, he chopped down a cherry tree, and then he refused to lie about it. And like this witch of a woman was like, no, you are wrong. That did not happen. That never happened. And then she summarily dispatched all of the American history that we had learned from 1st grade up until 4th grade, and she was like, now you are real citizens of the country, now that you know how things work. And again, it was that same sensation of just like the world moving underneath me, like how can history be unwritten like that? All of a sudden, just with one person's say-so, history is just changed, and it was just so strange. I didn't lament the loss of baby George Washington, it was just curious. And then a few years later, when I was in 8th grade, and I was assigned a science project. And I was in 8th grade, and being in 8th grade, I was tremendously lazy, so I didn't want to do a science project, because who fucking wants to do a science project when you're 14, right? So I didn't want to do a science project, but I had a really kick-ass science project in my back pocket that I had done when I was in 4th grade, right? And I was like, I got this. I'm just going to use that science project. No problem whatsoever. No problem whatsoever. And it was on dinosaurs, because I knew fucking everything that I need, everything that you could possibly know about dinosaurs. I knew everything about dinosaurs, guys. I knew all of their names. I knew what they ate. I knew everything about dinosaurs. Absolutely everything. I even knew that you could Myers-Briggs people based on what their favorite dinosaur was. You could very easily tell their personality. So like if your favorite dinosaur was a Tyrannosaurus Rex, well then you're probably super type A, you're kind of really boring to talk to at cocktail parties, you're tremendously obvious, and you right now work on Wall Street. Totally obvious, right? If your favorite dinosaur is a pterodactyl, then you're probably a little bit small for your size, you're kind of terrified, and you genuinely believe right now that you might one day get superpowers. Totally obvious, right? If your favorite dinosaur is that giant swimmy one that like just swims around, like then you probably, if you were a character in Harry Potter, be put in Hufflepuff. Like really obvious stuff, guys. Really obvious. My favorite dinosaur was the Triceratops because, come on, guys, it's fucking awesome. It has 2 swords and a shield built into its anatomy. Like that is an amazing fucking dinosaur. That is the best fucking dinosaur, obviously. Also, if your favorite dinosaur is a Triceratops, then you're genuinely terrified of being bullied pretty much all of the time, which is why you like having a sword and shield attached to you sort of perpetually, right? I knew everything there was you need to know about dinosaurs, like every fucking thing. I even knew what everybody's second favorite dinosaur in the world was, right? And that's the Brontosaurus. Brontosaurus is no one's favorite dinosaur. Like, come on, let's be serious. It's gigantic, it's really big, it's really slow, barely knows how to swim, it just eats leaves. It's like there's nothing to like about the Brontosaurus. But it's also like kind of an amazing like teddy bear looking thing. So it's like there's nothing to like about it, but there is everything to love about the Brontosaurus. It's the second best dinosaur in the fucking world, right? So like I said, going into this 8th grade science fair project, I knew I was going to ace it because I knew everything there was to know about dinosaurs, no problem. But I decided just to do a little bit of research just to make sure, you know, I was right. And so I opened a couple of dinosaur books, only to discover that either in the interim between 4th grade and 8th grade, or just because I had aged into some new material, that the Brontosaurus no longer existed. That the Brontosaurus had been discovered in the late 1800s, 1897 or something like that, and it was discovered by this paleontologist, and he declared it the Brontosaurus, and it became the second best dinosaur in the world. But that same paleontologist also discovered a different dinosaur earlier, which was the Apatosaurus. And upon closer examination, they were just the same fucking dinosaur, just 2 different people. And so, because the Apatosaurus, which is a really shitty name for a dinosaur, we got to admit, because the Apatosaurus was discovered first, the Brontosaurus no longer existed. It was just another Apatosaurus. And it was that same thing, that same feeling, the sensation of sinking in quicksand, where just a minute ago you had been standing on bedrock. Like the whole world stopped making any kind of sense. And the thing is, it was different. It was different a little bit because, like, Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy and the Boogeyman, like, those were constructs of my parents, and my parents were hippies, and they fucking went to Woodstock, and okay, they can do whatever weird shit they want to do to me as a kid. That's fine, they're just people. And like, baby George Washington, that is just a construct, albeit a super creepy construct of the US government, set to make us feel really, really like emboldened about our country. But still, those are people creating these ideas. The Brontosaurus was bone and fact, and like, it was science. The Brontosaurus, how could it suddenly not just go the way of the dodo? How could it didn't just disappear, it was just unwritten. It didn't just stop existing, it had never existed. A thing that I knew absolutely without the shadow of a doubt to be the second best dinosaur in the world was just gone, unwritten, and vanished. And if something as enormous as that, something as large and important as the Brontosaurus, because the Brontosaurus is fucking important, guys, to 14-year-olds, holy shit. If that can disappear, then if that becomes untrue, then what else becomes untrue? What else can we say that we actually know if we don't know this thing? It terrified me. I wept. I genuinely wept. And it stayed with me. This idea that any fact, anything that we know, any piece of knowledge can just at the stroke of a pen, at the turn of a single knob, can suddenly become untrue, can suddenly become non-existent. This idea stayed with me. It stays with me now, right now. I don't know anything. I don't know that anything that I know is genuinely true. I told you I was like 5.5 when I discovered that when my father eviscerated Santa Claus. I don't know if that's true, guys. I might have been 4. I might have been 6. Who fucking knows? Ben said that I'm a writer by trade, and it's true. And when people ask me, do you write fiction or nonfiction? I'm like, fuck you. What is the fucking difference? I don't know the difference. I'm not sure that there is a difference. And I think that's fucking cool. I love that. I love that we have decided to embrace knowledge as a thing that exists on quicksand. I love that we have embraced fact as completely impermanent. There is nothing absolute. The only thing absolute in the universe is the fact that there is nothing absolute in the universe. That is an amazing thing to hang your hat on for as long as it stays around. It was one of the most defining things in my entire life, and I celebrate it all the time until about 8 weeks ago, when I was scrolling through Facebook, and I come across this article that says they have gone back and done a tiny bit of research, tiny bit of stuff, and they realized that there is actually a marked difference between the bones that were found in 1897 and the ones that were found in 1890, different enough for it to be its own species, which means all of a sudden the Brontosaurus is back. The second best dinosaur in the world is fucking back, just like that. And not like it just came back on the stage. It has always fucking been there. We just didn't know it. How fucking amazing is that? How fucking cool is that? That is just the best thing that there is about people. That this is how we've chosen to engage with the universe around us. Like that. That knowledge simply is modable and changeable and shiftable. That we don't actually ever know anything. But there is one thing that I do know absolutely and unequivocally, and it is true and will always be true. And that is that next year, when I turned 6 and they brought out my birthday cake, there was a carrot plucked fresh from my mother's garden, enormous, and with hands made out of olive twigs, playing an upright cake in the shape of a piano, frosted brown, with Kit Kats for keys and white chocolate as well, sitting on a bench of Hershey's chocolate. And I would just say that as odd our relationship is with knowledge, as movable as it is, there is nothing as permanent and wonderful as our sense of awe. Thank you, guys.
That was Carter Edwards. Carter's work has appeared in Mathematics Magazine, Hobart, The New York Times, and others. His debut collection of fiction, The Aversive Clause, won the 2011 Hudson Prize and was published by Black Lawrence Press. His debut collection of poetry, from the Standard Cyclopedia of Recipes, was released last summer, also from Black Lawrence Press. He is a 2014 Poetry Fellow of the New York Foundation of the Arts, attended the graduate writing program at the New School in New York, and lives in Brooklyn. The Story Collider is produced by me, Brian Wecht, Aaron Barker, I. Daniel, Christine Gentry, and Skylar Bear. The podcast was produced by Rose Eveleth. Additional help from Brooke Williams, Lena Groger, and Justin D'Ambrosio. The theme music is by Ghost. Special thanks to Littlefield for hosting the show, and to Carter for coming back after 5 years. Thanks for listening.
What if you could have a career where the opportunities are as vast as our nation, where it's not about mission statements, but a shared mission? At U.S. Customs and Border Protection, we go beyond to protect more than borders. From ship to shore, air to ground, cities to local communities, CBP agents and officers are keeping people safe. Join U.S. Customs and Border Protection and go beyond for something far greater than yourself. Learn more at cbp.gov/careers.